None of those.
Honourable Chris Tremaine.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to take a call in this debate and start by just reflecting on the economic illiteracy of the opposition, particularly in that last speech by the Honourable Marion Street. And I don't say economic illiteracy lightly, because what we see again and again and again from the opposition is a tactic of trying to confuse people around the sale of state-owned assets, and particularly the return of dividends from energy companies. So let's reflect on that for a minute, because what the opposition want us to do is to treat the same income earned from revenue, from the sale of power, less expenses being that income, and put into the same barrel the sale of a large asset, which was Southern Hydro, a capital sale. They want the public to believe that the sale of an asset, Southern Hydro, when added to the profit, the genuine profit of those companies year on year, is what now reflects the dividend and is providing a 15% return. Well, that shows exactly the economic illiteracy that we're talking about. They are two totally different returns. And if that side of the House wants to include capital sales into the dividend stream, well, you know, that shows exactly the economic illiteracy that we're talking about, and it shows exactly why the New Zealand public voted National into government and made it very clear that they did not trust the Labour Party to be the governors of this country, to be in the legislative seat of this country for the next 3 years. So I'd suggest that if you're going to have a debate about state-owned assets, fair enough, no problems with that. We certainly had that in Hawke's Bay, loud and clear. However, make sure you tell the public the facts and make sure you're clear about that. Because I believe that the scaremongering, the way that you've approached your politics over the last 3, 6, 9, 12 years is one of the key reasons you find yourself in that position now. Mr Speaker, congratulations on your elevation to the role of Deputy Speaker. Well done. Mr Speaker, it's a real privilege to be elected as a Member of Parliament in this government and to have been elected on the platform that John Key laid out clearly throughout the election process and well in advance of that election. To say we didn't have a mandate for state-owned assets is frankly absolutely rubbish. That platform was laid out a year before we went to the polls. A year before we went to the polls. There were 4 key platforms that we stood on: responsibly managing the government's finances, building a more competitive and productive economy, delivering better public services, and of course, one of the key priorities is rebuilding that beautiful city of Christchurch. These were messages, Mr Speaker, that resonated strongly in my electorate. And I spent my campaign doing a campaign 30 jobs in 30 days, where throughout the period of the last 90 days, last 30 days of the campaign, spent that time working out there in businesses for at least a morning every day. And I got to meet all manner of people, many of whom were working in low-paid, low-skilled jobs. And it was a fascinating experience to spend with those 30 businesses. I want to thank the people that I had the opportunity to work with. When I reflect on companies like East Coast Lumber in Wairoa, on AFCO, when I worked on the chain in AFCO, the pie shop in Maraenui, where I worked with the wonderful owners of that shop and their customers, talking to them about the future of New Zealand and of Napier and of Hawke's Bay, and it was an absolutely wonderful opportunity. I'm proud to be returned to Parliament. It is an absolute privilege. And to actually see Napier lift its party vote to nearly 7,000. In saying that, I do want to acknowledge my opposition in Napier, Mr Stuart Nash. He fought a hard campaign, and I want to acknowledge that. It is a shame and unbelievably politically illiterate that Mr Nash now doesn't find himself on the opposition benches of that party over there. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, it is a privilege to be back into Parliament, and I'm honoured to have been able to have the opportunity to become a minister in this Parliament. I want to acknowledge the whips, though. It's a role I was involved with that for 4 or 5 years. Michael Woodhouse and Louise Upston. It's a big job taking on that. Half sergeant major, half pastor in the local church. Get into it, go hard. I also want to acknowledge Rick Barker pardon? I want to acknowledge Rick Barker for his efforts, but also, not many have acknowledged this, but Darren Hughes, who left this Parliament in the last term, I thought was an outstanding parliamentarian and certainly did an excellent job in that whip's role. He's going easy too, but I did want to acknowledge that. With my new ministries, they present a wonderful challenge, and I'm looking forward to that. In fact, when I received the warrant as a new minister, I almost had a baptism of water coming in on the Wednesday. It rained down in Nelson on the Wednesday night and Thursday, and I found myself down in my civil defence role down in Nelson. I just want to acknowledge the fantastic job that Civil Defence did down in that flood. Certainly the mayors down there, Aldo Michio and Richard Kempthorne, led the community exceptionally well. And Jim Frater, who was the controller in Nelson during that flood event, did a superb job. And I think that the community of Nelson should be proud of the efforts of Civil Defence in recovering, or in the response to the flood and the recovery efforts thereafter. Shortly after that, obviously we had the 23rd of December earthquakes in Christchurch. So again, straight down to Christchurch to be involved with the recovery there and to spend a day with people in the community. But to demonstrate it was a baptism of water, also one of the new roles is in transport, and we had the event in Tauranga with the Rena coming apart. So I found myself up in Tauranga having a look at the response recovery of Maritime New Zealand. And once again, I just want to acknowledge the efforts that are going on in Tauranga to make sure that the recovery process works exceptionally well. Over half the number of containers now have been removed from the ship. This is an extremely trying situation that the salvors are working under, and I think they are doing an absolutely fantastic job to get us to where we have got to today. In terms of the two key portfolios, civil defence and consumer affairs, they are going to play a small but key part in taking the government's agenda forward. And I just want to reflect on those in the last few minutes that I have in my speech this afternoon. In terms of civil defence, the key opportunities there are to learn from Christchurch, and there are a range of reviews that are being undertaken as we speak to consider how civil defence responded to the events in Christchurch, the two key earthquake events, and how we worked there. And in doing that, we'll reflect on or review the civil defence management plan and look at whether we could have had a better recovery framework that could replace the likes of CERA in future events. The other thing that we'll be focusing on over the next few years is that we have 16 regions, civil defence regions around the country. A capability assessment was done of those in the last couple of years, and there is a significant variability amongst those regions. I want to make sure that the capability in all of the regions is at a level where the civil defence authorities in each of the regions can adequately come up to the task in a significant event. In consumer affairs, we've got a range of activities going on there, which I'm looking forward to playing a key part in. The Consumer Law Reform Bill, which has been on the order paper since last year, can I acknowledge John Biscowan and Heather Roy, who played parts in bringing this bill to the table. We'll be focusing on bringing that law through. That's the 20 years law, which will be important to change and bring forward for the country. I also want to focus on some legislation that Sam Lotualiga has been working hard on, and actually Carol Beaumont on the other side of the House, and that is the focus on third-tier lenders. And that is that credit law reform. We're in the process of drafting legislation around that as we speak. I'm hopeful that that will be available for consideration at the end of February, early March, and then I'm going to make sure that that is well considered before we get it into the House for review. But if there's any lending community out there that needs more protection, it is the the Pacific Island, Māori and Pākehā community who depend sometimes on those third-tier lenders. We want to make sure that there are the checks and balances in place to ensure that lenders are well protected. So, Mr. Speaker, this government has a big plan. A huge economic agenda, 120 points that we aim to get into place over the next 3 years. I'm excited about the future of this government and where we're taking this country. My 30 jobs in 30 days period, working through the election, got me close to people who supported this government. I'm proud of what we're doing and I'm looking forward to the next 3 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tracy Martin.
Mr. Speaker, e te taha o taka